Hello again, it's Sue and I'm here to show you some more exciting and fun things you can do with leaf designs in watercolor. So I've gone around the garden and picked up a selection of leaves of different colors, shapes and textures. But I'm not actually going to be painting them realistically, so the color isn't really that relevant, nor is the texture in this instance, but I was trying to go for interesting and varied edge shapes and just moving them around on the paper, trying to put together a nice composition with variety and trying to get each leaf to touch another leaf because it's going to be important in the way we flow the watercolor. And I've got a few strappy daffodil leaves which might be useful once I've drawn these. You know, this one's just floating loose in the air, so if I ran a daffodil leaf through them, for example, I'd be able to get a connection where the watercolor can flow. So it's good to play with your design to start with. Just, you know, before you start drawing, you can move things around on the paper. And if you're not very confident in your drawing, you don't have to worry too much, because you can start by just drawing around your leaf lightly, or just getting a rough idea of the shape and placement, and you can refine your drawing after that. So I'm going to continue and make a drawing, remove the leaves, and then we can talk about the fun way we can introduce the watercolor. I have here my selection of leaves again. This here being a sycamore leaf, an acer, an ivy leaf, a holly leaf, an anemone, dandelion, clematis, and up there we have some lady's mantle, alchemilla, and then I've got a few little pieces here of ferns, and that there is an aconitum, which is a little bit complicated to draw, but if I decide that I need a little bit more to fill in the design, I could add in those freehand afterwards. But I've done a bit of a drawing here underneath, so I need to remove all my leaves and then I can begin to paint. Right, in this exercise what we're going to be doing is allowing the watercolor paint to flow in water. So first off, I'm laying down water where I want the paint to go. So I'm going to just do one leaf to begin with to show you the principle and the process. And then I'm going to move from one leaf to the next. So it needs to be well wet with water. Now I am using watercolor paper because if your paper is too absorbent, then it won't remain wet for long enough for the paint to flow. It'll just get sucked up into the paper. And I am working with a tape to a board so that I can tilt it if I want to. You could tape it down to a tea tray. If it's in a pad, you could actually just tape the edges of the paper. Right, I'm going to just put the little stalk on there, and I am actually going to wet this next leaf. Actually, it looks as though it's going to stay wet long enough that I can wet a few leaves at a time, because I'm wanting these to flow from one to the next. It's going to be more about shape and design than having realistic leaves. Okay, now the colours that I have here, you don't need a great variety of colours. As long as you've got a red, a blue, and some form of yellow, you can mix anything you want. Now I've got a pure yellow there, but I've also got a sort of golden yellow there, which I think might give me a nice range of colours for my leaves. So I'm going to start here with some red, just touching it, and you see the water carries the paint and it just flows around. Now I'm not going to clean my brush very much. I'm going to pick up the next colour, which is this golden colour, and just tip it in there and allow it to blend. Let's have some more of that up there. And I'm using reasonably strong paint because it's going into water. and they're going to blend, but because there's water on the paper already, it's diluting the paint, and as it dries it will become paler. So I'm not actually mixing it on the palette yet, I'm just putting the colours in exactly as they appear on the palette, and working reasonably quickly, just picking up one colour and moving to the next. And you see, if I tilt the board like that, the water flows around and it carries the paint. I've got to be a little careful that I don't flow off the edge there, but it only really goes as far as it can find water to travel in. So this is blending and making some very interesting colours. As I said, I'm not looking for realistic colours here at all. This is for fun. Let's go back to that goldy colour. So as you can see, I haven't mixed any colours on the palette, but they are mixing themselves together on the paper. And there, I'm just coming to put the little pointy serrations on. I think that's enough for that leaf. And then moving on to the next leaf. We're just allowing the colours to flow down the water. This one's wet. Now let's see. Here I will allow a little bit of mixing on the palette. So mixing the gold and the blue together. Give me a bit of a dirty brown. Let's put a little bit more blue in. And I'm going to let it touch that leaf there. Let's go to more of a pure blue. And in all cases here, I'm actually only touching the paint in at the edge of the leaf and allowing it to flow in towards the centre. Every now and then it's worth cleaning the brush. Now I've got this other yellow. Let's give that a go. Touch that in. Just change the shape of that leaf. This is a dandelion. And I'm trying to remember what that was. I think it was an anemone leaf. So we're letting that blend, and you see that little stem I haven't painted at all. Right, I have now run out of wet leaves, so it's time to wet another one, and I think I'll use a bigger brush to get coverage a little bit more quickly. Okay, and then carefully that stem. And then I can flow that water straight into this leaf here. And a little bit of the pigment is migrating with it. Look at all these beautiful colours that have formed. And you'll see that I'm not actually painting with paint, I'm painting with water, and then only touching the watercolour into this water and allowing it to flow all by itself, which is giving you a feeling of how watercolour works in its pure form. There we go, that one's wet. In fact, it's very wet. In fact, it's so wet I think I'm going to continue to the next leaf, just giving this a moment to dry off, in fact. And I've got a little drip there, so I'm going to just catch that in. There we go. So just moving from one leaf to the next, and you'll see now why I wanted the design to have connections, that one leaf just flows into the next. Okay. I can just wipe up if there's too much water on the palette. Okay, let's see now. I think it's time to go to some yellow. Now it looks very strong and vibrant there, but remember, it will be diluted in the water. Let's go from the yellow to the gold. That's nice. Now, where's my reference? Oh, it's got little fluted edge. So I can just put little points on there. Little points. And shall we add some blue and allow that to blend? Putting little flutes on. So to make the little flutes, I'm really just flicking outward from the edge of that leaf. Okay, I'm not going to do the stem just yet because the paint has started to flow in here and I think we need to get on with this leaf. Let's start with the gold there. And I'm putting quite thick paint here, it's quite creamy. And here's another leaf that I could have wet, so let's do it now. And I think I'm going to start with a bit of red up at the top of that and allow that to flow in. Now this has dried off. I can see that the paper's no longer shiny and you can see it stopped flowing, so I need to re-wet that section to allow the paint to flow. Yes, everything else is nice and wet. Okay, let's get a bit more red going. And then just pulling out towards these points here. Now this is thinner paint, more watery, actually the consistency of weak tea. And because of that, the paint will flow more and also it will dry paler, which will be interesting. I like to have a bit of contrast and variety here. Let's go towards the yellow. This is almost dried off. It's looking very nice. Give that a little bit more intensity. Okay. Do you see I'm not painting across the leaf? I'm asking it to paint itself. But it's a very mindful kind of activity. Just watching the paint flare in the paper and wondering where it's going next. Now I actually am going to mix on the palette again, the gold and the red together to get a really rich russety colour there. I can just for balance touch it in over there and it's starting to flow up that leaf there. Now this is quite a big area which hasn't had any paint flowing on it, so if I can carefully guide it around. There we go. Now you'll see here that that has dried off and this is still wet, and as this has flowed around it hasn't been able to travel where it's wet, so it's dried with a funny little rough edge there, but I quite like that on a leaf here. Now it's time to add in that little stem and let them flow together. Okay, and I'm getting that same effect here where the edge has dried and this is still wet, so it's giving me texture as though it's a bit of a dried out leaf with a bit of crackling on it. Now I think we need to go blue again, so let's get some blue going there. And allowing them to go together to make green. And I think when I get to this leaf I can just stop for a little while before I continue, because that will connect to the rest of the painting. some red here, and I'll drop some blue into that red, and it should make purple for me. Red and blue will make purple. So it's an interesting way of seeing which colours blend together to make which other colours. Obviously, if you mix them all together, you will get brown. So I would like to avoid that. That's why I'm actually not tilting it around too much. I'd like them to retain, I want them to blend, but at the same time have a little bit of individual character rather than all flowing together and making brown. I'm ready now to finish the last leaf, which as usual I start by wetting, but I won't go all the way up to the pointy edges here because I'm going to have a little bit more control with that. So let's get going with the paint. And you see I'm ignoring the pointy edges just for the minute. Getting a nice strong colour there. I kept this one rather paler. And I think we need a bit of red. This is still going into very wet surface. So it will fade quite a lot as it dries. Now, while it's still wet, I can come in and pull out those points. There we go. So just working from the center and flicking them out. And this needs to happen while everything is still wet. There we go. And get that one to connect over there, although it's dry so they won't run together, but in terms of the design they're connected. And then, while this is still wet, I'm actually going to bring this ivy leaf over a little bit while they're still wet and there's still a moment, and just let them connect. And then let's have a bit of a leaf coming down there and up there. So those two elements of the design are connected. And here I need to bring the stem of the sycamore leaf. No, it's not a sycamore leaf, that was the geranium. And a very pale little stem to continue this grass or daffodil strappy sort of shape. And perhaps we could bring that around there just to make a nice flow to the design. I think this needs a little bit more strength. And I'll run it away with water. And there we actually have a lovely abstract painting of leaves where we've got realistic shapes but abstract fun colours and letting everything flow together.